Good morning, everyone. Glad you're here. Let's get right at it. Austin, how are you doing? We got a couple things we want to touch on that are interesting that fit the theme that we're talking about.
Yeah, really interesting. Had a great long weekend. Hope you and everyone at home did as well. We'll jump into kind of the interesting story. If people remember, anyone who's been kind of following along with us for a while, we talked about an interesting company. We said maybe there'll be kind of a competition to Uber or something like that called Face Drive. And we talked about them, maybe 3 or 4 months ago. And let's just say
Yeah.
Face Drive haven't had a good time recently,
No.
to the tune of 56% down last week, 96% down since its high back in February, which actually February may have been when we were talking about it. I think it was more recently than that, but yeah, they've had a rough go of things. They've had basically their entire chief executives there and directors have all resigned. The stock was up at $60. It's now down at $2.06.
Yes.
So they've had a difficult go of things, and there's a few interesting kind of layers and pieces to this as well. You have the former chief executive accusing another founder of actually driving the stock price down. It's really a very interesting situation, and I'm wondering kind of what your overall take on it would be, Andrew.
Well, when we had talked about it before, we kind of highlighted how shockingly overvalued this thing was. And listen, and part of what's kind of occurred here, if I understand the story entirely correctly, was there was some agreements kind of made on the side. We won't sell stock, and one of them was kind of like, no, I'm going to take some of the profits off the table because this thing, why wouldn't I? This is nuts. That's the right move. I mean, it's tough because if you're building a company and you want to build, like you're building a company, you don't want your stock rising that fast, that quickly. You don't want that. And if it does, you need to contain it so well, because you have people that are founders that have millions and millions of shares. And if the thing goes up 5,000, 10,000%, and you're able to sell, how much more return do you think you're going to get off your company? Like, sell it. Like, yeah. I mean, even if you have the best intentions to build a company, you've got this vision, you'd want to take some money off the table regardless. Now, I know that we into the details of it, that some of them had locked in clauses till 2023. So they're annoyed and pissed off. But, here's what this is what happens when you get these massively overvalued tech type plays that have value. I mean, this company, was a revenue of $4 million. And what was the market cap at its high? Oh my goodness. I don't know if I've got that ready here.
I don't think I do either, but I remember when we talked about it, it was just something insane. They posted revenue, 4.3 million in revenue, and the loss of 5.9 million in their latest quarter. So it would have been
a couple billion. Yeah, like it would have been a couple billion, because they're sitting at a market cap of 170 million today at $1.70. So if they were up at 60. So 6 billion, I'm guessing. Yeah. If I'm doing the math quickly, even if it was 3 billion and you're making 4 million, that's not good numbers. So, this is what happens with these bubbles. And we're certainly in lots of bubbles right now. And you see people writing about, hey, the market could drop, pull back 15%. There could be this, could be that. We've been talking about all these bubbles for a long period of time. But if you keep on pushing out cheap, free money, hey, you can make anything last for quite some time. And we're not trying to be, panic, gloom and doomsayers, because I'm very wary of certain stocks in certain areas that are massively overvalued. And that's fine, because there's a lot of them that can pull back a ton. And we've highlighted the downside of, say, a junior venture Canadian corporation that has lots of IP that's really interesting and doesn't have a huge market cap, or say the mining sector as a whole with not a big market cap or size. It can survive because money has to flow into areas that are critical and more defensive, even when things get absolutely pounded on. So there's a lot of money out there, and there's going to be some uncomfortable situations, but we feel confident in that core foundation of having the things that make things, and having, mining and having commodities. This is going to be the best, safest, but also a growth area moving forward.
Yeah, and I think when we talked about Face Drive and it being overvalued, we kind of hinted on, a lot of tech stocks at the time, and even still today, are massively overvalued. And we were kind of saying, is that exactly where you want your money to be? And the conclusion that we had both kind of come to was Well, no, because when you don't really have anything tangible, this is a prime example of what can actually happen. And it's a messy situation. It's brutal for anyone who is involved in the company, but it just shows. I mean, the company themselves didn't even address it until the stock was down 95%.
Yeah.
So that's a really, really tough situation for people to be in. But it does kind of highlight the risks of this game that we do play. Despite all the fun that we can have with it as well, people can take some big hits out there if they're not careful and not kind of looking into things properly.
Yeah, and you get caught up in a situation and you think, okay, this company might make X dollars, and you're going to pay a multiple, like hoping that it's going to have the free cash flow that you're looking for, but it may not happen until 2183. I'm being ridiculous, but it could happen 30 years out. And that's not being ridiculous. And you think, are you willing to pay that during today's situation in this kind of climate, and with all that's going on, and you've got this COVID is going to and flu season and everything else, it's going to kick in here again, which actually leads into another more interesting story. Because I mean that's not interesting. It's sad because people kind of get blown up. The people that had free trading shares, I'm sure lots of smart investors made tons of money. But you get a lot of people holding the bag as well. But it kind of fits in a theme that we've been talking about: chain of custody, where things getting made. There's been a lot of news over the course of the year, and once again, not in mainstream news, but out there, if you go look, about container costs, so shipping costs in the last year from January to today. You can look at Irish News has like a ton of articles, like almost every month they have an article. But we have one actually because we might as well stay relative and in our community. Burnaby Board of Trade demands investigation as shipping costs soar more than 400% in 2021. So it used to be that they pay about $1,500 to $2,000 a container. They're paying 10 or 10.5 right now. In the States, there was an article saying it's about 20. It's about 20,000 for a container.
Yeah.
So this is huge.
It's massive. It's insane, and it kind of highlights. And I mean, it's interesting as well. There's an interesting layer of, in a situation like mine where you're kind of landlocked here in Alberta, this doesn't become an immediate effect on your radar. But then you mention Ireland, you see something in the news about it every other week. That's where these things start, but eventually that trickles down its way into the more landlocked areas as well. And that should be a sort of alarm bells are ringing situation for people. And that's an insane, I mean, even if we just take it as 2,000 to 10,000, that's an insane increase for, anywhere from a 20-foot to 40-foot size shipping container. That's a massive increase, and I'd be interested to know what your take is on why that's happening and how if any way we can get around this or better this situation.
Well, no, it's going to get worse. It has to get worse because as this COVID event and moves forward, and we're going to have more shutdowns coming up. It's going to be tougher to ship things because they're going to they have to check every container now. And it used to be you'd check for drugs, but this is different. If you're pushing that there's this pandemic and you can transport disease, they have to check every single one of these. The cost of trying to ship things around now is enormous. Plus, it is an unsustainable model to have. And this is talk about complex and the absurdity of the model we've created in the world is I'm going to mine in, say, Canada, and we get some copper, we send it out to be processed somewhere else for a part to be made in China. It's then assembled in Mexico as a car part and put into a car somewhere else. And you're shipping these parts and pieces all around. And somehow that's cheaper than if you just had a country that was able to make some of their own pieces and make things as well. And this idea of globalization, and I don't mean like at the bare bones, of course, there's global trade. I don't mean economically we shouldn't trade, but this globalist ideology of we're only just going to send everything to be made in third world / China and let them control all of the means of production is a total nightmare scenario unfolding and will continue to do so. Because even when we saw, Desert Mountain was looking for a certain piece, they needed one piece for drilling. They had to go get someone to make it for them. I mean, that's going to be multiplied now by 10,000 because all sorts of pieces that need to be shipped, that were shipped, that were no big deal, are going to become more onerous. And it could be, if we look to say Biden's infrastructure plan, this could be an opportunity, is to say, listen, we don't need to compete necessarily with China with industrial and creating jobs of like blue collar jobs to build and make things again, but maybe we should ramp it up a little bit. Maybe Canada should start actually making manufacturing, making things that it uses. If you rely entirely on other people, and what we've done now is pretty much everyone relies entirely on China. This is not a good plan moving forward. It would be foolish even if it was just we rely entirely on the U.S. and we've got great relationships with them. Very different if it's with a completely opposite government, ideology, beliefs, and everything else. It's a very, very precarious situation to put oneself in. So not only politically and socially, but certainly economically, and we're seeing that, and it's going to get worse.
Yeah, and it's a different situation, if you were to say like with the US, and they're obviously Canada's biggest trading partner, and we're one of the United States' biggest trading partners as well. It's different even just in the sense of logistics. Like we've got the largest land border in the world that we can literally just drive across. If you're dependent on China, there's an entire Pacific Ocean between us and China, right? There's an entire Atlantic Ocean between ourselves and Europe. So when you start, even without the ideological differences and whether or not you want to be dependent on foreign nations, I don't really consider the U.S. a foreign nation. They're our closest ally, right? If it's different, even just from the logistics standpoint of when you do have disruptions like a COVID situation, like talk even hurricanes out in over the Pacific Ocean or anything like that, it's going to cause problems. And if that starts to happen more consistently, or there's other little chinks in that supply chain, this is the problem that arises, and we're not on the winning side of that. That's for sure.
No. So that's a bigger whole belief system. And do you believe in country? Do you believe that you should have the needs of your country met and that the people are employed and doing things? To me, I mean, it's a kind of an obvious one, but I know that there's the push to not have that. But that's a different conversation, and it's not one that I'm very interested in. But it ties in with, we trade a lot, and we send over a lot of food to China. Like we're talking a ton. So not only are we having costs of food increasing, we're having fertilizer becoming a very big issue with the price increasing. And now we see the shipping costs of trying to get the food over to China increasing. So once again, we've just started into this path. I'm not trying to be a doom and gloomer. Like this is just the information. This is just the data that's coming out now.
Yeah.
So we look at these and go, well, how do we take advantage and not only take advantage, but how do we apply this knowledge and how do we work it? So we look at the Ariana phosphate, which we've met and talked about a number of times. We look at fertilizer companies. We look to see who's not getting any love, who's completely being ignored, that has a good product, that has good management. Could they actually make a go of this? And we do that across the board, looking at companies that are trying to solve problems that aren't blown up and totally overvalued. And that's where you can find a lot of safety and a lot of growth. Specifically in the area that we are in. And, we're very fortunate to have the companies that we have that in our portfolio that we're pretty proud of.
Yeah, Ariane's such an exciting opportunity because they're meeting that critical need. And we talk about that a lot. We hammer home that point a lot of, having to meet your critical needs. But that is going to be such a massive issue over the next decade, really, as kind of things take shape and maneuver. But they're an awesome company to look at. I mean, even over the last month, their stock's up almost 8% or something like that. So they're trending in the right direction as well. Phosphorus prices are trending in the right direction for them. So that's always super exciting. And it does help counteract what we're seeing in this kind of issue we're presenting of saying, hey, our supply chains are going to be disrupted. How do we combat that? Well, this is one example in many. There's tons out there, but it's one example of how we can combat that. Yes.
And I also, because it's along the same kind of big major themes too. And we've been talking about GMG a little bit lately, and it's risen up quite a bit in the last week. They came out with another press release here talking about how their coatings, and once again, we focus mainly on the batteries because that's excitement. Like, oh, small batteries, where can this go? Like all this Internet of Things. That's the big leader and very, very exciting space that everyone's really looking at. But I don't want to discount that they just had their energy solutions, so savings from cooler transportation. So in their diesel trucks, they're able to decrease the temperature by 2.7% reduction, and it's 25%. It cools 25% faster when they put their coolant and apply it into these buses. So this is actually, it sounds very menial at first, but it actually adds up quite a bit. So like Craig Nichols stated, so city bus uses 25,000 liters of diesel fuel per year. And with approximately 220 hours per month, Thermal XR powered by GMG graphene based off these results could potentially save over 650 liters of diesel fuel per year per bus. So that could also reduce carbon emissions by about 1.8 ton of carbon dioxide per annum for each bus. So here's a company, again, that has a quick shift in way of thinking and application of a product that can go into currently used vehicles. It doesn't have to, there's not a lot of big adoption of the system. And they can apply their coolants and have this kind of effect. And this is the stuff where we all dream about this green day when we're gonna have all this high tech and this is great and whatnot. And I even talked about, fission and fusion and all these types of wonderful things that could be 10, 20 years off. This is something today where we're taking big steps, solving problems, and GMG is doing this on a product line that this in and of itself is very exciting, because you think of all these buses and transportation systems in anywhere hot, like where you're using, there's plenty of hot places on the planet where you could have this kind of savings in diesel, but also so much savings of the carbon dioxide emissions. So wonderful story developing, and it's not a story. I mean, it's proven. So it's just good to see these things, and these are the companies we like because they're solving the problems that are on the forefront of everyone's mind.
And we've said it a million times with GMG, and I'll probably say it a million times again. That's just one product that they have. That's just one of their many different, like they've got their air conditioning, cooling, they've got the lithium-ion batteries that they're using. It's incredible what they're doing over there. So really good one to stay locked in on. And kind of a funny story, I have a friend of mine who put a good chunk of money into GMG, and he was excited yesterday when the price went up, and he said to me, he's like, "Hey, are you taking any money off the table right now?" I said, "Hell no, dude. This is gonna keep running." Yeah,
why would I?
Yeah, not right now. Things are looking too good on that front. So.
Yes, there's too many good things happening, and I mean, there would be. I don't see any sense in doing that. So now we're going to finish off quickly because, I always like to talk about critical reasoning and critical thinking, and also take a shot at some of the PR/media lobbyists out there. I don't call them journalists for an obvious reason. There was this big viral hoax by Rolling Stone. Now, other than if I wanted to go read an article about music, I mean, I'm never going to look at Rolling Stone for any other reason. I stopped reading that years ago because it was just, quite frankly, kind of garbage. It's kind of in the realm of Salon or Huffington Post or this type of stuff. It's not real stuff. It's kind of Inquirer level, but it's a big name. Everyone knows Rolling Stone magazine. I mean, it's a big name. It carries a lot of weight. So there was a writer there. Let's not name the person. They're getting enough heat right now, who essentially just kind of made up a story here, and we're not going to get into the COVID ivermectin whole story. But she wrote that there was all these long lineups for a hospital with gunshot wounds, and they couldn't treat them because of all these ivermectin overdoses at this hospital. Within a day, the hospital put out an announcement saying, "This has never occurred. This doctor hasn't worked here for 3 months. He had a relationship with us, but he hasn't been here. We have no ivermectin overdoses here at the hospital." So the doctors come out and spoken and clarified as well. And if you look at Reason, and I love Reason.com because it's reasoned. They try to avoid all politics. And the doctor, when you look at everything, the doctor didn't make the claims at all. He was talking about two different events at two very separate periods of time, and they kind of ran with it and merged it into one story that sounded a lot better. So he's cleared his name, but it's an interesting article because it shows how misinformation goes out. And I can pull out almost every day an article like this that is completely misguided, misinformation from both sides. So from both sides, there's crazy on both sides. And we'll say that with ivermectin, you can't just go take ivermectin and you're cured of COVID. That's insane. It's not, and even, whether it's CDC, FDA, they say, listen, we need more data. We need more research. Yeah, we do. But there are studies already. And I mean, I know you had a bit of a comment on it as well. So.
Yeah, well, there's kind of two interesting takeaways from that. The first one would be on the overarching thing with ivermectin, that it does, if you want to kind of look at things in a critical way, and you look at the FDA's approval for emergency authorization on vaccines, they have to have no current viable treatment. So that could be a reason why there isn't a lot of big studies being looked at in ivermectin. The other thing on ivermectin is I wouldn't trust anyone who's telling you either of these two things when it comes to ivermectin. They're telling you it's a horse dewormer that is not safe for humans. You're being lied to. And anyone who's telling you that it 100% treats COVID is also lying to you. It is with a lot of these things, the truth always lies somewhere in the middle. Ivermectin has been used on humans since the 80s. Its creator won a Nobel Peace Prize in 2015 for its use on humans, but there have not been any viable studies that say that it treats COVID. I know it has been used in the US, prescribed by doctors, very high profile by Joe Rogan and others very recently to help combat COVID. It's also been used in India and Argentina, and there's been some effectiveness with it there, and Africa as well. But there's been no clinical study, high grade trials done to really solidify that yet. So there's potential with it. But what I would tie into and say that maybe the reason it hasn't been looked at to the degree that it should be is because of that emergency youth authorization. And if they can't get a viable treatment to the table, then they're able to continue that emergency authorization. So that's one angle to kind of look at it from. That I
you can't push the vaccine if there's a treatment. So they're not in any hurry to do that clinical study, and they're not going to be in any fast event to do it. That being said, you're going to see, I imagine, some sort of version of ivermectin for human from Pfizer or Johnson & Johnson or Moderna. That'll be a once-a-day pill to ward off, and it will look awfully similar. Let me just pretend to tell the future. And it will be maybe a requirement, along with all the other shots and everything else that you're going to have to take as well. So it's a long story with ivermectin because it's dirt cheap and there's no profit in it. But if you make a new one, and you do some studies, there's a good profit margin there. So anyways, leave that alone. But I wanted to highlight that because this you'll see and it was Rachel Maddow tweeted it out too, supporting it. So it goes viral. You pump out this misinformation, and it just serves your cause for what you want to do. And this happens every day, all the time. And believe me, smarter minds do this on purpose, because once someone is willing to put out an article like this, she's killed her career. Well, hopefully at least, because it's complete fraudulent. But she's helped her side. She's helped her cause, if that was her cause, was to get this out. Because once you put it out there, you have people running around saying all these idiots taking horse dewormer. And it is a horse dewormer. It's used for animals, but there's a human version of it. Once again, misleading people and misguiding people. At the end of the day, if there was something that could treat someone being sick, shouldn't we investigate it? And that's what we say about anything, is if you've got a reasonable mind, if you're interested in critical thinking, if you're interested in actual facts, then why not? Why wouldn't you investigate it? So it's an interesting story. It's a very big highlight. We watched it for since 2016, this constant narrative from especially from the far left news of complete baseless claims that would turn out to be false. Yet I still hear people parroting them, and I go, wow, that's holy smokes.
Well, because you can see it so frequently where you get an article like that where, and I'll credit Rolling Stone. They put out what do you call it when
a retraction or
a retraction to the story that they changed it. They said originally the story had said 70% of all ICU admissions were from people taking a horse dewormer. It was actually 2% of all hospital admissions were from ivermectin. 70% of those were people that had taken the horse version of ivermectin rather than the human. So little bit of this, but they put out the retraction. But what happens is when you have someone with the platform that Rachel Maddow has to put out a story to her followers, even if, and she hasn't, but even if she retracted it and said something different, there's going to be so many more eyes on the original story than there is on the retraction. And you're going to have literally millions of people going around thinking that gunshot victims in Oklahoma are dying in the streets because people are taking horse medicine that's apple flavored. And it's my favorite part of the whole story, and maybe we'll wrap it up here though, was the picture that they used for the article. It was I watch a lot of college football. I watched Oklahoma play Tulane on Saturday in beautiful. I'm not in the U.S. It was probably 93 degrees Fahrenheit. It was about 34 degrees Celsius. And the picture they used for the hospital lines, everyone's in winter coats and they all lined up, look like they're freezing cold. I was like, I don't think that was Oklahoma yesterday.
No, and I remember they did find out where that photo is taken from. It's stock footage from another place, so they also had to apologize for that. But it just goes to show it's either complete incompetence, political misguidance, or it's just laziness. Either way, this is the state of our media moving forward. And if you want to stay ahead of the curve and you want to really kind of nail down how you want to live, it's going to take a little effort, a little digging, a little bit of interest and curiosity to say, does that sound accurate? Maybe I should look into that. And once you start looking, you're going to find a lot of stuff very quickly. Some you're going to like, some you're not going to like. But for me, I'd rather know the facts. I'd rather know the truth. And I'd rather be able to make decisions for myself, for my friends, and for my family from that platform rather than imaginations.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll kind of wrap it up by saying, we always try to do the best job that we can in giving the most accurate representation of what is actually going on and presenting these stories to people. So if you like what we're doing, make sure you're liked and subscribed. Make sure you're signed up on our website, following us on social media. And we're going to continue to try to do the best job that we can in highlighting these stories and providing that information for people.
Absolutely. Thank you, Austin. Thanks so much. Take care, everyone.
Cheers, guys. We'll see you all on Friday.